The closest charts I could find today on this, coming up here till 2003, just shows that since the early 90s, this trend has simply gotten worse. There's been no increase. There's been some decrease in the earning of the bottom two quintiles, and the top ones are soaring upward further still. Here we have income distribution by decile in selected OECD countries. So they've cut it into 10 pieces here. And we find the U.S. right here, and you can see by the length of the bar that the U.S. has the widest income disparity of any of these countries, these developed countries. Here's a chart showing the gain from 67 to 2003, again, between the 95th percentile, the median, the 20th percentile. And you see that people down in the 20th percentile, the lower class in America, their income has hardly changed between 67 and 2003, whereas the wealthy, their income has soared during that period. Here's the same thing on a different chart, using quintiles again, from 79 to 2005. So this is more current. And we see this staggering inequity where the poor in America are staying poor, even getting poorer, whereas the wealthy are just soaring forward in increasing wealth. The top 1%, look at their jump in wealth. Hunger in a Global Economy, they have an article there saying how the United States has the highest inequality in the industrial world because of the income gap between well-educated professionals and workers with limited education. Over the past 20 to 30 years, Americans have also experienced the greatest increase in income inequality among rich nations. The more detailed the data we can use to observe this change, the more skewed the change appears to be. The majority of large gains are indeed at the top of the distribution, says economist Timothy Smealy. Percent of households below poverty line by type of household. So at the bottom are all households, and this year it was that was a couple of years back. It was 14% at that point. It's gone down to 13. Probably go back up as we speak with the recession in progress. General families only 10%. Families with children 14%. Look at the top one. Female-headed families with children 41%. Oh man, so that looks like that is a significant factor in poverty in the U.S., doesn't it? Single mothers raising children are the poorest. And why are they single mothers? Usually because of divorce or because of teenage illegitimacy. Those are the most common reasons. Here's another observation. African Americans are more than twice as likely to be poor than whites in America. So there's a racial aspect to this as well. And you can also probably connect those two dots because illegitimacy and single-parent homes are rampant in the inner city today. Here are types of households. Single-parent families compared to married families. This is from a different source. This includes those single-parent with fathers. When we do it single-parent with mothers, female-headed families, it jumps up to 6 times more likely to be poor than intact families. We see that the same thing is true in the black community. More of intact families of blacks are poor than of intact families of white, 9.9%. But still way more, 39%, near 40% of single-parent households are below the poverty line. This chart compares birth rates for teenagers That is, teenagers having kids in a number of different countries. And we see that the U.S. at the top, by far, is the worst country in the developed world when it comes to teenagers having kids. It's rampant in this culture. That number, this is from 95, UN Demographic Yearbook. And the last information I got on this is that teenage birth rate in America has declined a little bit since this chart in the past few years. So that's maybe a good sign. Factors in unmarried births. Why are young girls having children and they're not married? And why is this so rampant in our culture? Seidel argues that factors contributing to teen pregnancy and childbirth include inadequate sex education, especially about contraception and family planning. Yeah, I wonder about that. You know, when I grew up, I was a teenager back in the 60s. You couldn't even get a condom. You had to be 21 to buy one. Not that I was out necessarily shopping for them all the time, but that probably my friends were. You sure couldn't get them from your school, I'll tell you that. Frankly, today we're in an ocean of condoms. You know, they're being thrown at us from every direction. And yet the teenage illegitimacy has soared during these past few decades. Aren't we really looking here at a spiritual issue? Why wouldn't you fornicate? Why not hit the sheets and maybe get pregnant? Isn't that really a moral, spiritual question? It is for me. That's the only reason I've ever had for not doing it. It has to do with the will of God and learning that sexual immorality is just exploitation of another person, using someone else's body to gratify yourself. That's why we as Christians don't believe in it. We believe that sexuality belongs in the context where two people have decided to commit their lives together. And so where you see groups of people meeting God, adopting His point of view, you'll see teenage pregnancy drop to virtually nothing. Yeah, a lot of causes of poverty are spiritual. Here's another factor. Percent in poverty in the U.S. by education level. So those with less than a high school degree, very high level of poverty, a quarter of them are going to end up below the poverty line. Them and their families with them. High school grads, only 12%. If you've had some college, maybe an associate's degree, that goes down to 8%. And people with bachelor's degree, it's relatively rare. Only one person in 40 would be poor in that group. So education is obviously a huge issue here as well. And any effort to minister to the inner city, to the urban poor in the U.S. had better have something to do with educational help. Because the large city school districts, including our district, have betrayed the poor person. The education that you can get in these school systems is pitiful. And people come out after 12 years of school functionally illiterate. How well is that person going to do then in a modernistic society when they can really basically not really read? And all the money has to do with technology and being educated. That's a pretty hopeless situation. And whose fault is it if they got up to teenage years and they've been in school that long and didn't learn how to read? It's hard to blame the kid.